I've never directed that the boys should do anything, either sort of song-wise, artistically wise, or speech-wise. We all make up our minds, and I contribute, I suppose, a fifth.
Who was Brian Epstein? Brian Epstein is often referred to as the fifth Beatle for his integral role in the success of the Beatles. His management helped propel them from a local Liverpool band to international superstars. His influence on their image, style, and public relations was pivotal in shaping their global appeal. Let's take a closer look of the life of Brian Epstein. Brian Samuel Epstein was born on September 19, 1934, in Liverpool, England. Brian was the first son of Harry and Melka, also known as Queenie Epstein. They were a family of successful retailers. The Epstein family was of Eastern Europe Jewish origin. Brian's early childhood was spent in Liverpool, where he was born at 4 Rodney Street. He had a younger brother named Clive, born 22 months after him. During World War II, the family moved to Southport, but they returned to Liverpool in 1945. Brian's early education was challenging. He was expelled from 2 schools for laziness and poor performance. Despite the setbacks in his early education, Brian went on to attend Wrecking College and later the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, also known as RADA, though he did not complete his studies there. Instead, he chose to join the family business, where he demonstrated a talent for salesmanship and a love for classical music. At the age of 16, Brian started working at his family's furniture store on Walton Road. His time in the family business was interrupted when he was conscripted for national service at 18, but he was discharged after being deemed emotionally and mentally unfit for service. Brian Epstein's early life was marked by a mix of personal challenges and family support. His experiences in the family business and his exposure to the arts would later influence his approach to managing the Beatles and other successful acts in the music industry. Brian Epstein first learned about the Beatles when a customer requested the single My Bonnie at his family's Nems record store in Liverpool. This single was an imported German release featuring the Beatles backing Tony Sheridan. Despite initially believing the song was solely by Tony Sheridan, Epstein did discover that the Beatles were the backing band on the track. The request from My Bonnie led Epstein to investigate further, which eventually brought him to the Cavern Club to see the Beatles perform live. His first encounter with the Beatles was in November of 1961 when he went to a lunchtime concert at the Liverpool's Cavern Club. He was immediately captivated by their music and their humor. Despite having no managerial experience, he was determined to manage them. Epstein's interest in managing the Beatles was met with skepticism by their former manager, Alan Williams, who advised him against it. Despite this, Epstein was determined and began courting the band with a series of meetings at his store in December of 1961. The Beatles were initially hesitant, with concerns from their families and the skepticism about Epstein's lack of experience in artist management. After several meetings and negotiations, the Beatles agreed to a 5-year management contract with Epstein, which was formally signed on January 24, 1962, at Pete Best's family home. The contract stipulated that Epstein would receive 10% of the band's earnings, up to £1,500 a year, and if the band earned more, his commission would increase to 20%. By 1963, this had risen to 25%. Under his guidance, the Beatles' image underwent a significant transformation. Epstein replaced their leather jackets with suits and ties, giving them a more polished and professional appearance that would appeal to a much broader audience. Brian Epstein was determined to secure a record contract for the band. After trying Decca, Pie, and several other small labels, he eventually landed a contract with George Martin at EMI's Parlophone Records. The journey to this contract began on February 13, 1962, when Epstein had his first meeting with George Martin. This meeting came after Epstein took the Decca audition tapes to HMV on London's Oxford Street. During the lathe cutting process, HMV's Jim Foy expressed interest in the recordings, and upon learning that several of the songs were Lennon-McCartney originals, asked if Epstein wanted to meet Sid Coleman, general manager of Ardmore and Beechwood. Coleman offered to broker a meeting with EMI producer George Martin, in exchange for which Epstein would give his word that, should the Beatles sign to EMI, Ardmore and Beechwood would get the publishing rights. The meeting took place at EMI's head office in London's Manchester Square, where Martin heard the Decca recordings of Hello Little Girl and Till There Was You. Martin was initially not impressed with the tape Epstein played for him. However, he did notice a quality of sound and a certain roughness that he hadn't encountered before. Despite his initial skepticism, Martin offered Epstein a lifeline. He said, "If you want to bring them down from Liverpool, I'll give them an hour in the studio." The band set up in Studio 3 at Abbey Road on the afternoon of June 6, 1962. This session was crucial as it led to the signing of the Beatles with EMI, and a standard recording contract was offered to Epstein. EMI committed to recording a minimum of 6 sides songs in their first year, which would normally be released in 3 singles. EMI would retain the rights to the recordings, production, and reproduction. All recording time and associated costs would be paid by EMI. As the Beatles' manager, Brian had many responsibilities. He managed their contracts, concert bookings, and financial affairs. He also ventured into merchandising, which became a lucrative revenue stream for the Beatles. He established a publishing company, Landmark, to handle the band's music publishing rights, further increasing their income. He also organized and managed the Beatles' tours both in the UK and internationally. He was responsible for planning their schedules, booking venues, and handling the logistics of their performances. His meticulous attention to detail ensured that the tours ran smoothly. Beyond his professional responsibilities, Epstein provided personal support and guidance to the Beatles. He was known to be fiercely protective of the band and worked tirelessly to promote their interests. His close relationship with the members of the Beatles was instrumental in maintaining their unity and focus. Looking back now, you could see that Brian's management of the Beatles had both success and failures. Here are some points to look for. Epstein discovered the Beatles in a local Liverpool club and had the vision to turn them into the biggest band in the world. He believed in them when no one else did. Despite having no experience in artist management, Epstein secured a record deal with EMI's Polyphone label. Within months, the Beatles became international stars. Epstein was instrumental in raising the Beatles' profile both in and outside of Liverpool. He got them into films, TV, and played up their charisma, personality, and humor. With all this, his lack of experience in the industry also had its downfalls. He had been accused of mishandling the Beatles' U.S. merchandising company. This was a significant event that had unforeseen consequences. Epstein is often accused of negotiating bad deals regarding copyright, including the agreement that eventually saw McCartney and Lennon lose ownership rights to their classic songs. Even with his success in introducing the Beatles to the world, Epstein's lack of experience led to many missed marketing opportunities. Regardless of all these mistakes, it's important to note that Epstein's belief in the Beatles and his efforts played a crucial role in their success. His vision and management helped transform the Beatles from a local band from Liverpool into a global phenomenon. It's good to note here that to call out any bad decisions Brian made is only through hindsight. There's no way anyone could have predicted the unprecedented success the Beatles would achieve. It may be said that without Brian being so relentless in making the Beatles a success, they may never have been what they are today. But Brian Epstein faced significant personal challenges throughout his life due to his homosexuality, especially in an era when it was criminalized in the UK. His struggles were compounded by societal pressures and personal conflicts. Epstein's homosexuality was a source of personal torment for him, as he lived in a time when being openly gay was not only socially stigmatized, it was also illegal. In the 1960s, Epstein was arrested for persistently importuning various men for immoral purposes, a charge stemming from the anti-homosexuality laws of the time. Despite his professional success, and the glamorous image he projected as the manager of the Beatles, Epstein often felt isolated and lonely due to societal prejudices and his inability to openly express his true self. Throughout his life, Brian had several discreet relationships with men, but details about these relationships remain largely private and are not well documented. Epstein's attempts to maintain these relationships in secret contributed to his feelings of loneliness and isolation. So although Brian's sexual orientation did not directly impact his professional relationship with the Beatles, it did influence his personal life and contribute to his struggles with depression and substance abuse. Epstein's inability to reconcile his public image as a successful manager with his private identity as a gay man added to his emotional and psychological burdens. On August 27, 1967, Epstein died from an accidental overdose of a sedative, which was exacerbated by alcohol consumption. He was just 32 years old. This left a void in the band's management and is often cited as a turning point in the Beatles' career. The Beatles were deeply affected by Brian's death. They were attending a transcendental meditation retreat in Bangor, Wales when they received the news. Paul McCartney immediately returned to London, while John Lennon, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr spoke briefly to reporters before leaving Wales and were visibly shocked by the news. In the aftermath of Epstein's death, the Beatles faced a period of uncertainty. Epstein had been integral to the management and the direction of their careers. Without his guidance, they had to navigate the complexities of their business affairs and creative direction on their own. This led to a more experimental phase in their music as seen in projects like Magical Mystery Tour and the White Album. Epstein's absence was felt as a loss as the managerial buffer that had previously protected them from the business side of the music industry. The band's dynamic changed as they took on more individual responsibilities, and this period marked the beginning of a new era for the Beatles, one that would eventually lead to their disbandment. Epstein's death was a turning point, prompting them to explore new artistic freedoms, but also exposing the vulnerabilities within the group.
It was a huge void. We didn't know anything about, our personal business and finances, and he'd just taken care of everything. And I suppose it was chaos after that.
Paul made an attempt to carry on as if Brian hadn't died, I think Paul had an impression we should be thankful for what he did, for keeping the Beatles going.
This shift in responsibilities led to increased tensions and disagreements among the group. John Lennon once mentioned that the band hadn't really been functional since Epstein's death, highlighting the disarray his absence caused. The need to fill the managerial void left by Epstein eventually led to the controversial appointment of Alan Klein in 1969, which further strained the relationship within the band. The loss of Epstein's unifying presence is often cited as a contributing factor to the eventual breakup of the Beatles in 1970. His death marked the end of an era and the beginning of a period of transition and turmoil for the band members, both personally and professionally. In 2014, Brian Epstein was posthumously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Decades after his passing, Epstein's strategies and management techniques still serve as inspiration for music managers and entrepreneurs worldwide. Epstein's visionary approach and unwavering dedication to his artists have left an indelible mark on the music industry. If you really enjoyed today's episode and you want to see more, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on your notifications. Or if you have any suggestions for videos you would like me to make, please leave it in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Bye.